Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Law and Tax Clinic with Ajaz and Salman Anwar. Um, before the break, we were talking. We got about 40 minutes now. So before the break, we were talking about what Salman did before he set up his own tax specialist firm. We then went on to talk about a bit about what VAT or well, it's the same now, isn't it? They're all together now, and they had separate departments back in the day.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably before your time.
yeah. Well before my time, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but I remember it.
you had the Inland Revenue and Customs, and
Custom,
now
yeah,
it's
yeah.
Revenue
It's
and
all revenue
Customs.
and customs. Yeah. So what actions they take in order to investigate businesses? Um, so guys, in fact, before I carry on, if anyone wants to ask any questions in relation to a tax issue, we're happy to give guidance, not advice, but a bit of
No,
guidance.
no advice.
Not advice. It's difficult to give advice in over the radio for a two minute conversation. Um, so you're welcome to phone the studio on 01902 972 150, or you can WhatsApp us on with your messages on 07440 420 432. Right, Salman. So where were we? We were talking about
Your restaurant case, basically.
my
Is that what
restaurant
it
case.
was?
That was an interesting case. It's one I won't forget actually.
Yeah.
It
You
went to
don't
the
forget those kind of
yeah.
cases. Yeah.
It went to the High Court.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it went to the High
No
Court.
wonder it
So
cost him 90K. It was just your fees, wasn't it?
well, it's
Part of it.
part of it. No, our fees weren't involved in that.
Oh, okay.
No, that's just the other side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
90K was just the fine.
Yeah, courts are expensive. I mean, on the serious point,
Well,
if you do end up in courts, usually what happens with my cases is when it's getting to that point, we tend to have a serious conversation about is it worth the candle going that far or not with my clients. So
So do you know? I'm going off what we
let's go
discussed,
off
right?
piece. That's fine.
Right. So if, for instance, nowadays it's hard for a lot of businesses. I've noticed that a lot of businesses are struggling, right? But the expenses are still there, right? The expenses are still there. The income may have reduced, but the expenses are still there.
Yeah.
So therefore, they are struggling to pay their either wages or this, but then they choose, say, for instance, to pay the wages because obviously that person's in front of them. They can't not pay those people.
Yeah.
But then in the back of the head, oh, I'll. When it comes round to, I think we have a call. 1 second. We'll come back to the question.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Is it a Wolves Radio?
Assalamu alaikum. This is Wolverhampton.
Hello?
This is Ramadan Radio Wolverhampton.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry for that. Yeah. I just saw you had in one of the groups on Facebook. Do you accept card payments?
Sorry, card payments for what? Sorry.
Like card payments for any of your service you might be giving. Like any point you have to take a payment from a customer.
Any payment? No, we're doing a show on tax at the moment. Do you have a question on tax?
No, it's not about the question. We actually the providers for card terminals and online
think we
payment
got-
facility. I was wondering that you might be taking.
You're live
some
on the
sort of
radio at the
payment.
moment. You're live on the radio at the moment.
I'm live.
You're live on the radio at the moment.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
so
that's
we're
interesting.
you're on the Law and Tax Clinic. Do you have any questions in relation to tax?
Not for the tax.
Right.
We are actually a payment service.
That's fine,
providers.
not a problem. Maybe you could call the other line at some point.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you.
That's fine. Bye.
Never gonna forget that. That's, yeah, someone selling you
selling
card services.
selling his card services. That's funny. You saw the advert, and the advert probably had the phone number to call in live.
Yeah,
He thought, let's call in.
yeah.
Trying to promote his business, I guess. That's clever.
Can't knock that.
And I've gone off. What was I talking about? Yes. So, and they can't say if they, because obviously things like tax and VAT, obviously VAT every quarter, tax, on yearly. So if they decide, okay, they put off the VAT, that's only going to add up.
Of course.
They're going to be chased.
Yeah.
What happens then?
So piling up tax debt in that way, so not making payments, whether that's VAT or PAYE or as you said later, the annual taxes, it's not generally a good idea. So it's probably a sign that the cash flow of the business isn't optimum. But what HMRC does is that at that point, the debt management department of HMRC kind of takes over. So probably one of the biggest parts of HMRC, usually staffed with very sort of junior staff, generally speaking, and basically they are your sort of hounds who go after you for the money. So they will try and get the money in. If somebody can't generally pay it, HMRC can make them go out of business, basically, shut them down. So that's not, I mean, you can agree time to pay arrangements with HMRC if you do get into difficulty for whatever reason, and that does happen for genuine reasons. Usually you can have 6 months, 12 months, and so on. The longer you want, the harder it is to convince them, but you can break it down. But the downside of that is you then have to pay interest on that anyway. And, well, that accrues regardless, even if you're not paying it. So it's, yeah.
But it's better to try and contact them and agree something rather than, hide away from the problem, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, if they think you're doing that, then they'll escalate it to sending some field force agents out to talk to you. Doesn't sound as scary as that. They just come out and collect the debt rather than anything else. And beyond that, they will initiate insolvency.
To be fair, I had a client who had one come round, and he wasn't very pleasant. No, he wasn't very pleasant. My client said, "Well, I'm trying to negotiate with a term with, and I'm supposed to call you guys back." And he was just like, "Look, you've collected it. It's ours. It was ours. You collected it for us. You need to pay it." Not polite at all. So and I think
you do get that. I mean, in terms of HMRC staffing levels and quality of staff, that's taken quite a downward dip over the last decade or so. So that's.
I thought maybe they're just hiring Rottweilers.
Yeah, possibly. Who knows? But generally speaking, they're not providing people with the right level of training and whatnot. So you do get people who go off the wrong end of the.
Because when you think about it, there are people who want to avoid tax, or but those who want to avoid it don't actually declare it, right?
Yeah.
If the person's declared that this is how much I've earned, but is struggling to pay, then clearly the first step, in my opinion, should be that they try and say, okay, can we come to some kind of arrangement where you're not out of business, and we get what we need as well.
Absolutely, and I understand where you're coming from. I think the thing with the way HMRC approach these things is that over the last, especially since COVID, because the country went so much into the red, they've been tasked with being tougher on debt collection. I mean, HMRC's debt book stood at, I think if I remember correctly, last year something like 40 odd billion or more. So and a lot of that would eventually get written off. So the politicians, the governments of the day have been putting pressure on them to say, now you've got to collect it. How are they going to collect it? By threatening to put people out of business. I mean, the avoidance and all of that, that's a whole different we can get into that in a minute, but it's like, like you said, people who want to, the more correct term in my opinion would be evade tax, will not put it on their return.
Well, exactly. They wouldn't, would they? So, anyone who does has got no intention of not paying.
A restaurant example, probably have a till that doesn't work and a till that works, or a drawer that they pull out and that's where they put the money into, or 2 card machines or whatever. Like people do all sorts of
I've come across stuff. You should see what the barbers do.
That card provider might have some options for you,
Sorry. Oh yeah, the card guy might have. He called at the right time then. Should have asked him these questions.
Asked him, do you offer payments into different bank accounts? Because that was the thing. That's why HMRC has that
Yeah.
merchant acquirer data
Maybe we
provisions
should
now.
have. Yeah, maybe we should have involved him in our conversation.
Just figure out how to
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. How to?
not how people don't
We
pay
can't say.
taxes.
Yeah, we
Not
can't
how
say
we're gonna do
evade.
it.
We
Yeah,
can't.
yeah. How do people do it normally?
Right. Okay. Um, so, what is it that you do now then, in your daily
Yeah.
at work? You get to work. What is it your daily role is?
Oh, that's a so in a nitty gritty way. I mean, if I'm being a bit flippant, I normally say I argue for a living with HMRC.
Okay.
So that's kind of been that. But what it involves is talking to clients,
Mm-hmm.
analysis work, or I get my bookkeepers to do, looking at bank statements, looking at records, things like that. My job is to then look at that in the whole and figure out what we're doing, what's going to go in a disclosure, looking at the tax legislation to see what HMRC is saying. Is it the right thing? Is that how you're supposed to interpret it? And then things like, again, looking at the legislation to see what their powers are. Can they ask this question? Can they not ask this question? So my day-to-day job is a wide variety of things, from phone calls, meetings, letters, but all of it boils down to arguing and protecting my client
Mm.
against HMRC.
Sure. So it's much more than their standard accountant would do, because
Oh,
as I mentioned, that accountant to you from 20 years ago.
Yeah, I don't take it from 15 to 90. It's usually going the other way around. Most of my cases, alhamdulillah, I tend to go in the completely opposite direction. Usually from a lot to not much. But
But when that happened, he just swore and says, "Oh, yeah, they're racist."
subhanallah. There's always that card that we can. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some element of truth to that sort of stuff. I've come across it, not necessarily experienced it, but yeah. But look, no, I'm not an accountant by any stretch of the imagination. All due respect to my accountant friends out there, that's where I get a lot of my work from.
Yeah.
But I don't do your bookkeeping or end of year accounts and self-assessment returns. Yeah, I'll run a mile away from those things.
Okay. So let's talk about any misconceptions. So, what are the biggest misconceptions, in your opinion, when dealing with or about dealing with HMRC?
They're never gonna find out is the biggest one that a lot of people think. I can hide and I can get away with it. I think maybe even up until 10, maybe 5 years ago, there was a semblance of truth to that. The thing is, HMRC not only now gets the data, which it has been getting from hundreds of sources, if not thousands of sources on each one of us, it's now very good at connecting those dots as well. It has a system called Connect, which pulls in unimaginable number of data points on each particular person. So I'll give you an example. When I was in HMRC, if I was investigating you, Ajaz Ali, I would be like, okay, put you into that system, and it would produce a spider diagram that would fill up this wall. Which phones you've had, which SDLT returns you've done, which houses you've bought, which firms you've had, which companies which bank accounts, anything you can think of.
And related persons as well.
Absolutely. Who are you related to? Mother, father, son, daughter, brothers, everything would come up. And on top of that now, HMRC also has into that things like, for example, if you have a bank account in Pakistan or you have a bank account in India.
Really?
Right. So if I don't know if any of the listeners have experienced it. So when you open a bank account in a foreign country, when you open it in this country, they ask you your tax residence.
Yeah.
Your UK resident. The reason is if you're a resident in one of the other countries that they have agreements with, they have to tell that country. So if you put on the UK bank account, you're a Pakistani national, then they will have to tell Pakistan that. So same thing happens with Pakistan. So when I last opened an account 4 or 5 years ago over there, they asked me my tax resident, which is UK British. Now they every year annually will tell HMRC under the Common Reporting Standard what my bank balance, what my income, what my gains might be on that, and it gets here. What HMRC does with that is then uses that to start investigations.
Oh, that's
so we've
interesting.
had over the last 4 or 5 years probably hundreds of thousands of people of Indian origin getting these letters because India was one of the countries and there's a huge population here, and dare I say they probably do a bit better at using their accounts over there to kind of generate income and whatnot than some of the other subcontinent communities, and there was a huge number of letters that have gone out. I mean, my estimation on that is hundreds of thousands, if not more.
Wow.
So you get. I mean, we've probably taken a tangent here, completely forgotten the original question. But one of the misconceptions.
It doesn't matter, but it's interesting that the whole point. I didn't.
I mean, HMRC finds out about a lot of things, and it does that now more often than it ever used to, in my experience.
Wow, that's something I know. I'm thinking about my bank account in Pakistan now.
Whether it's bank account, whether it's land, whether it's whatever,
Yeah.
they have an obligation under the Common Reporting Standards, which is an international framework of about 100 and can't remember the exact number, but it's over 100. It's about 120, 140 countries that have this Common Reporting Standards agreement, and they do this information sharing. On top of that, you now have the crypto assets version of that, and you have the individual information exchanges under the double taxation agreements, and you have a plethora of ways that HMRC gets information locally and internationally.
Wow. Wow. That's woken me up.
Yeah.
Right. Undeclared income.
hmm
So what happens if someone has undeclared income? Can they come forward voluntarily?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is, depending on the amounts and the way that they've hidden it, they could get prosecuted with a view to investigated criminally with a view to a prosecution. That's HMRC's topmost power. Normally they do it through the CPS, but HMRC is also a prosecuting authority. The lawyers out there will know that, but they can criminally pursue the most serious cases. Generally speaking, they prefer to investigate on a civil manner and to get the money in for the exchequer. So if someone's in that sort of situation, yes, the thing they should do really is think about making a disclosure to HMRC in the right way with specialist help before they get a letter from HMRC, or worse, knock at the door at dawn.
Oh, yeah, don't raid.
That's exactly what they do.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's different ways of making disclosures. There's loads of facilities. There's a handful of facilities that you can use. They all have terms. There's one facility which, effectively, if you've done the most serious kind of stuff. So if someone comes to me and says, Salman, I wasn't paying my taxes, kind of knew what I was doing, but I didn't pay it, I would say, okay, there's a high risk that you're going to get prosecuted on the back of this once I gauge their value. And then I can say to them, okay, there's this facility, it's called the Code of Practice 9, Contractual Disclosure Facility. And what that allows you to do is make a disclosure and get immunity from prosecution if you're deliberately not paid your taxes. So that's one that allows you to stay out of prison while you get yourself back on the straight and narrow.
Okay. That's interesting. So how does the HMRC identify people for investigation, then, in your opinion?
Like I said, lots of different data sources. So from going through that data, risk analysis. So they have a dedicated department called RIS, Risk Intelligence Service.
Okay.
RIS, I can't exactly remember what they stand for off the top of my head, some reason. But basically, their job is to go out there and analyze the data that comes in, and for whatever the reason. So HMRC can investigate based on information it receives. So someone phones up and says you've committed tax fraud, they'll look into that, and if they can connect some dots, come after you. So if you've got a return that says you earn £12,000 a year,
Yeah.
and you've got £1 million house and you never declared it, they'll ask the question. So the way that they identify people, it varies. So they have task forces. You mentioned restaurants. They've had a restaurant task force for ages. They've got something called the Let Property Campaign, which goes through similar, so land registry data, SDLT data, reports from solicitors, and everything else in between, and it identifies people who have rental income, have not paid their taxes. That's just one example. I mean, right now, one of the hot cakes I've got at the moment, and I can see this as HMRC is kind of really trying to disrupt the industry, is around fast moving consumer goods and VAT fraud related to that. So a particular example is people importing EU soft drinks into the UK.
Oh, yeah.
Selling
Yeah,
it to
yeah.
UK
Ice and
customers.
what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they sell it to UK customers, but what they do is they don't pay the VAT on it and disappear with the VAT.
Right.
And then basically what HMRC is doing is coming after the UK companies that are in the next one along the chain and saying you knew or should have known they were going to do this because the deal was too good to be true. So even though you've paid the VAT over to them, they're the one who've disappeared. Now you pay it again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's called the Kittel principle in VAT, and HMRC's, if anyone's into sort of wholesale distribution, fast moving consumer goods, they have to be really on their toes and make sure they're doing the due diligence on who they're buying stuff from, because if it goes wrong, you'll pay twice. basically it puts you out of business if they come after you for that.
Wow, that's because there's quite a few with everything that's going on around the world, and all the boycotts.
Yeah.
There's quite a few people as you said, importing.
I mean, that in itself is not bad. What's bad is what it's linked to is you can get the unscrupulous.
Yes, the point I was making, it wasn't that the actual act is bad.
Yeah.
I'm saying I was agreeing with you that it's
There's a lot of that
some
going
people
on.
will take advantage of that,
Absolutely.
and on the back of that, probably importing things that which people who are say
Yeah.
pro-Palestine, etc.
Yeah.
They'll be they'll want, and therefore.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm talking about things. That's a great example because it's going to be open to
Yeah,
abuse for
exactly.
the people who want to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
And they can make a lot of money doing this sort of stuff. But the thing is, HMRC is catching up with a lot of them, and they've got an intense pressure on this industry. But in my example, it's not even like alternative. It's basically the EU version of Coca-Cola, for example.
Yeah.
That can
Oh,
from the
yes.
EU will cost you different.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And what they do is because the way they bring it in, the way they make the money is not on the selling of the can. They make it because they do one with the VAT. excuse my
Right.
language. Right? To get
Okay. So again, takes me back to the restaurant days. Actually,
Yeah. It's like PTSD for you, that isn't
it is, isn't it? No. So a lot of the restaurants, when you go into a restaurant, you'll see that they got foreign Coke and foreign.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because these cash and
Tends
carries.
to be a bit cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these cash and carries are imported, or someone's imported and selling to these cash and carries.
Yeah.
And what they do with it is
Very widespread. I'm not
Yeah.
saying every one of them is involved in it, but
Yeah.
somewhere down the line,
yeah.
some aspects of that chain, or huge aspects of that chain, or significant aspects of those chains have got VAT fraud involved in there.
Interesting.
So
You opened my eyes again.
yeah. So it's sector-wide stuff. So what that was trying to get at there is sector-specific kind of targeted task force-based investigations. So they know that's an issue. They've identified it, and now
Yeah.
they're going after it.
Okay. No, brilliant.
So if you're in that sector, you can at some point expect HMRC to look over your supply chain.
Well, I'm sure quite a few of our listeners are in the food sector, so food and property is big in Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
So I think every person has got. Well, I say not every person, but every family has got maybe more than one house. So that's moving on to that now.
Yeah.
Actually.
I know. So your favorite topic from earlier on, like houses and people not paying their taxes.
Well, yes, yeah, no, because that does happen. Someone's approached me. Actually, I was supposed to refer them to you.
Okay, that's brilliant.
So someone's approached me on this, but they're not local. They're Scotland based. But I would say the law is the same or similar.
Tax-wise, I
Yeah.
mean, there's some nuances, but I mean, like
So-
you have Scottish rates of tax, but that in the main is the same.
Yeah, so I'll give. In fact, I'll give that person as an example. So the person has said to me, he said, his spouse passed away, and he says she had some property on her name. I said, oh, okay, and he goes, so now the probate starts. They call it something else up in Scotland instead of it's not grant of probate. They call it something. I forget what it's called, but so I was saying, yeah, you got to do that. Go see your solicitor over there because I can't do that down here because it's different laws. And I said, well, with the taxes, he says, she never paid tax on it. I said, what? I said, how long have you owned a house? Oh, I think one of the houses probably 30 odd years.
Wow.
Initially, they were living in the house. Then they moved out.
Yeah.
And they've been rented out ever since. But never paid any tax on it. And there's 2 or 3 properties like that.
Wow.
So
Do they own them jointly, or is it the wife who owned them?
those are the wife, but I'm sure he's probably got 1 or 2 on his as well.
yeah, a lot of stuff.
I
comes
only
out of
asked about the
woodwork.
wife's one because that was the topic at the time.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he's got 1 or 2 of his own.
Yeah.
So I did say to him, I said, I think you need to see a tax specialist. Right? I said, not your accountant, because he's got some Pakistani accountant up in Glasgow. Well, I said, no, not your accountant.
Nothing against Pakistani accountants.
No, nothing against Pakistani accountants. That £15,000 owner was Pakistani as well. But no, nothing against Pakistani accountants. No, I can't say anything against Pakistani accountants. My brother's an accountant. So yeah, I can't say anything against them. Um, but now I said that he needs to actually speak
Yeah.
to you. So I will introduce you.
Thank you.
But on that note,
Yeah.
maybe you can elaborate a bit more on when such, because this happens quite a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would say, I don't know about any other community, but I can say for the Pakistani community, I've known people for years who I know that, they've probably got to the one and they think, oh, I only got the one, no one will know. But sooner or later,
Yeah.
something will happen.
Yeah.
Because, if they got a tenant, for instance, who's on benefits,
Yeah.
all of that government system is now, before councils are maybe separate from the government, but now the benefits are all coming from the central system.
Yeah.
You'll notice that all websites, wherever, whether it's your car, whether it's your tax in your car, whether your MOT, whether it's your national insurance, everything is linked to the Gov website.
Yeah.
So that clearly shows that they're all interlinked.
I mean,
Land registry is
I
same.
mean that's a really good observation. But even before that, I mean, I've been in tax for 11 years since I started in HMRC. HMRC's always had that data on benefit claimants and stuff like that. So it
Okay.
knows. So if you've got a benefit claimant on that property, the thing they'll do is they'll check who owns it. The next thing will be, okay, that person, now they're on our self-assessment system. If they're not, if they are, they'll check if they've got income on it. Usually they're not going to be on there, and that's it. Bingo. Send a letter. So it just takes that kind of. The way I explain it these days, it's a case of when,
Yeah,
not
not
if
if.
HMRC finds out.
Yeah.
In the case of this potential sort of, this client,
Yeah.
let's just say the person from Scotland. Now, because she's passed away, anything that she's not done right, there's an obligation on the personal representative or whatever they might be called up in Scotland, the
Yeah.
executor, to rectify that. Now, I don't want to sound, I don't know, morbid in any way, but it's a good thing she's passed away because they can only go so far back.
I hope the
If she-
husband's not
yeah.
watching me on
From a tax perspective, let's just say they can only, when someone passes, they can only go back so far. So you don't try to cheat death or anything, but by the time death catches up, that's one way to cheat taxes. I know
So
you
if
don't-
everything's on your wife's name, what you
Yeah.
need to do is kill her.
let's
Is that what you
not-
say?
let's not- no, it's like at all what I'm saying. But in her case, because she's like she's still gonna have liabilities that the
Yeah.
executor needs to pay, but it's a shorter period than, for example, I mean, the maximum HMRC can assess is 20 years on income tax, so they can go back 20 years. That's a long period. That's 2004, 2005.
I thought it would be 7 years, but clearly I was wrong.
That's in the if you've never submitted a tax return, there's a good chance they can satisfy the criteria to go that far back, unless you have a good advisor who's going to be able to pull out some good excuses for why you haven't done it. If you've been submitting returns, then they'll need to usually show that you knew exactly what you're doing. But the problem with that then is they'll then go, well, if you knew what you were doing and you put a return in, that's tax fraud. So they could try and prosecute you. So in that particular case, I mean, if that person was coming to me, my advice to them would be, look, you need to make a disclosure of some sort, figure out what the disclosure looks like, figure out what is the liabilities, and then we kind of figure out which way is the best way. And in that particular case, I would probably be looking at something like the Let Property campaign.
Okay. Well, if anyone wants to know a bit more about that, I'm sure they can contact you. In fact, I insist they contact you before they have a knock on the door.
Yeah.
Right. So let's move on. We're short on time a little. We've only got about 9 minutes left, actually.
Oh.
So if we move on to, say, the latest developments.
Yeah.
So latest developments in tax, and so any recent changes in tax law that individual businesses should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of changes. There's always changes in tax law. If anybody ever picks up or has the misfortune of picking up books that have our tax legislation in it, they stack up on top of each other about a foot high or more. I did a presentation a few years ago to at a university for some Chinese delegates from their tax authority. When I said it, they were aghast at how much it is, and it's more now. So it's like there's vast amounts, and the reason is because there's always changes. I don't know if the listeners would know, but we wouldn't have income tax in this country if the government forgot to legislate it at the start of the tax year, because it's an annual thing that
Yeah.
the Finance Act has to go through. It tells us there's income tax because it's not something that's set in stone. But the latest, I mean, there's always changes. The biggest changes we've got at the moment, in terms of coming in April, are around employers' national insurance contributions. So it's it's how much an employer pays percentage wise on their employees. So secondary national insurance, the threshold for when they start paying, that's come down from 9,100 to 5,000. The percentage has gone up from 13.8 to
That's going to affect a lot of employers.
15%. So employers are going to be massively impacted. National minimum wage is going up, or has already gone up. And again, that is a multiplier on the tax changes. If you imagine you're going to have to pay more, well, your threshold's gone down and the rate of secondary has gone up. So you're going to have to pay more national insurance. I think that's on the tax side. Other things that will probably impact.
I think the
people.
stamp duty changes as well. I
There's
think
stamp duty, that's for individual
properties. Yeah.
properties.
So that's the threshold has dropped down from 250 end of this month.
Yes,
From
it
250
is.
to 125.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's quite a few changes there as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's loads of other ones. I mean, there's things around, people would have heard about the non-dom changes coming in, things around if you're looking to sell your business, the rate you get taxed at, the business asset disposal relief, that's gone up. So there's loads of changes. The best thing any business person can do is make sure they have an accountant who's going to keep them up to date with these sort of things.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I see. A lot of people, they're after cheap when it comes to accountants. In my opinion, when it comes to your doctor, your lawyer, and your accountant, I think you should.
You're one of them, so definitely. There's no conflict of interest there.
No, you should,
Yeah.
invest in, because they're the ones who'll keep you out of prison, keep you out of trouble, and keep you out of
Maybe the doctor will keep you out of prison. I don't know. But no, look, I as someone who's not an accountant or a lawyer, or was the
doctor.
Or the doctor.
Yeah.
Well, I could have become a doctor, but that's a different story.
Yeah, you got to look for it.
But as someone who's none of those things, I 100% agree. I think it's, if you get what you pay for in the long term, I think what a lot of people mistake is they wanna get up in the world and create wealth and all of that, but not pay any taxes, and they want to probably do it in a misguided way.
Yeah.
I personally say, look, if you pay for a good accountant who's going to structure things for you properly, and lawyers and advisors, then that in itself will give you a return on your investment in the long term.
I had a lady on the phone this morning saying, Paji, can you, can you पैसे साबने लाए? Do you understand Patwari?
Yeah.
Right. पैसे साबने लाए.
Yeah.
Right. I go, right. I hadn't told her how much it was, right? In fact, I've not charged her, right? But पैसे साबने लाए, the काम अजब है. So, the ones job done straight away, immediately, kept on phoning me at Sehri time, right? Right. Kept on phoning me, and then wants the job done straight away, but then doesn't want to pay. I say I've not charged it yet.
Yeah, that's the lawyer in here. There's a timesheet somewhere.
Oh, that's another story anyway.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'm surprised that no one actually called in to ask any questions other than our card.
We had a kind of card supply. I never take any card payments. What I could do with one.
No, to be fair, I don't take card payments. I don't take card. I used to. I don't do anymore because I hardly, with our business, most of it's transfers. So I hate cash because then I have to travel all the way to the bank.
Where are those now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably a post office.
Yeah, it was 3 miles I have to go to just to and then find pay and display to go and put the money in, for which they're going to charge me anyway. So it's better to have transfers. So yeah, right. So any one piece of advice that you would give to listeners about managing their taxes better?
That's a good question. I think, look, tax is an inevitability. I think that if you look at the examples of people who do well, it's not necessarily that they don't pay taxes at all. They're clever about it. So don't
tax-wise.
Be wise about it.
Yeah.
And also, look, the thing is, the fact that you're going to pay tax means you're making some money, especially if you're in business. And like I said, you don't have a choice if you're an employee, but if you're in business, that usually is a good sign. So my advice would be to don't look at that too badly, to be too disheartened with it, but get yourself a good accountant and a good advisor who's going to make sure you can structure things in such a way that you can put most of that money to good use.
And what your expenses, I would say.
Absolutely. Cash flow.
Cash flow.
Cash flow.
Is
cash
king.
is cash is king.
Yeah.
If you don't have money in the bank, you can have the biggest, best profit and loss figure, but if it's not in your bank account, it means nothing.
What did they say? Turnover is vanity.
Yeah.
And is it profit is sanity? No.
I don't know about that part.
Something
I just
like
know that cash is king.
Cash.
I just remember that part.
Right. Okay. That's good sound advice there. To be fair, I suppose one of the advice you already had given about find yourself a good accountant as well. So
Yeah. Not the one with the 90K.
no. Stay away from Stafford Road. Anyhow, so where can people find out more about ADL Tax and you and your work?
Our website, adl.tax. It's nice and easy.
Nice and easy.
If people want to kind of connect with me or get in touch, the best place to find me is LinkedIn. So obviously, you can go on our website and if anybody's got an issue, they can book a call in, a discovery call. Otherwise, LinkedIn, that's where I mostly waffle.
Well,
That's
yeah,
where
you
probably
do. I
we
was going to say,
connected.
I've you know, many times when I'm bored, I've sat there and read your waffle.
Fair enough.
But no, besides that, you know, you do quite a bit of charity work, which I do want to actually question you on. I don't have enough time on the show, but I do want to question you on. And I said to you when we spoke last week that I'm interested in learning more about that because I saw that you went to which country did you go to?
Kenya.
Kenya, yeah.
So I'm in whatever spare time I have left after tax, or it's probably the other way down. Whatever spare time I have left after doing the charity work, I do some tax. So I'm chairman of Mission Relief, which is an organization that works largely in Kenya, but also other parts of the world.
Is it a registered charity?
100% registered charity, 100% donation policy.
Okay.
Bunch of me and some of my good friends who initially set it up, and I started trying to help them a little bit with bits and bobs that I could do.
Very good, very good. I will talk to you on that because I don't know whether you know, but well, you should know. But law firms have matter balances. So if we can't get hold of the client, we can give to charity.
We will set up a direct line for you to our CFO who
There
can
you
take
go.
that money from you.
Yeah.
Because alhamdulillah, we're doing alhamdulillah, the brothers are doing good work out in Kenya, and it's a much needed.
Good, right, guys, we've come to the end of the show. Inshallah, I'll be here again next week with hopefully another guest. Once I've arranged one, but inshallah, see you next week. Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.